there, Advanced World Studies students. Miss Dumas here, and today I want to do a quick review on what sourcing is. Specifically, I want to talk about the different components of sourcing, why we source, and then, so hopefully you guys remember that there are 4 ways you can source a document. You can source it for historical context, you can source it for purpose, you can source it for POV, or you can source it for audience. But remember, you only source it one of these 4 ways. So when we're looking at historical context, what we're doing is we're trying to tell the reader what is going on during the time period that the document is talking about. So what's going on during the time period that is relating to what the document is talking about, but then you have to tie it back to the argument you are making in your DBQ, which we will get to in just a minute. If you choose to do purpose, what you're trying to do is tell the author what is the purpose of the document, and then what is the main goal of the author in having written this document or painted a visual or whatever else. What is the author trying to accomplish? And then once again, tying it back to your argument. Then we have POV. POV stands for point of view. So if you're going to source for POV, what you want to do is say, what is the author's POV, not the document? What is the author's POV? And then you can do one of 2 things. Either explain why the author has this point of view, or you can explain how is the author's point of view credible, why or why not. But then, once again, once you've done that, you still have to tie it back to the argument. And then finally, you could choose to do audience. And all audience is you're going to tell the reader who is the audience, right? How do you know that's the audience? And then why did the author choose this group to be the audience? And then finally, tying it back to the argument. So whenever you source a document, you pick one of those 4 ways to source it. And obviously, pick the easiest way to source each of the documents. Think about what would work better. Would it work better to do POV for this document or historical context for this document? Think about that first before you source. Now, once you've decided what documents you're going to source and you've picked which way you're going to source and you know how you're going to source it, then you've got to do this thing called tying it back to the argument. This is the point that most of us are kind of missing when it comes to sourcing. So whenever you source a document, let's say you're sourcing it for historical context, and you give a really good historical context, you explain what's going on during the time period that's related to what's in the document. Now you have to tie it back to the argument. How does this help support the argument you're trying to make in the paragraph? How does it help tie back to the evidence that you're using for argument? And so in the next video that I create, which I go over the French Revolution sourcing activity, I'm going to show you guys how to do this. So remember, you've got to source 3 documents, or for the modified DBQ, 2 documents. Make sure that you're only sourcing for one type, whether it's historical context, purpose, POV, or audience, and make sure you're sourcing for exactly what you need to do for each of those. So hopefully, as you guys can see my dog in the background. Ookie, you want to say hi? Ookie, say hi! That's Ookers. Okay, so now that we know what sourcing is and the different components, let's try to do an example. Recently, a lot of you wrote the Mongol DBQ, or, the impact that the Mongols had, modified DBQ. So let's take an example if we were doing purpose, and let's start with what I saw a lot of. So I saw a lot, regardless of the documents that were being used in the Mongol DBQ, I saw a lot of the purpose of this document is to expose the abuses of the Mongols. So let's say this was the document on the murder that the Mongols were committing in the Russian city of Novgorod, right? Okay, so that is true that is probably the purpose, but that is an incomplete sourcing. You told me what the purpose is, but you haven't told me why. So a more complete version of that sourcing would be this. The purpose of this document is to expose the abuses of the Mongols in order to warn other cities as to what would happen if they didn't surrender. Okay, we're almost there. You've got the purpose for this one, and you've explained why that's the purpose. But we're still missing one component, which is tying it back to the argument. So let's see what it looks like when you tie it back to the argument. So then we have something like this. The purpose of this document was to expose the abuses of the Mongols in order to warn other cities as to what would happen if they didn't surrender, because not surrendering is what led to such mass amounts of murder committed by the Mongols. This is a complete purpose sourcing right there. If in the paragraph you're trying to say one of the effects of the Mongols was committing mass murder, and you've given evidence from this document to show that there was mass murder committed, now you've told me what the purpose is, why the purpose was, which is they let cities warn cities to that you need to surrender. But now this is the part down here that you've used to tie it back to your argument. You have said, hey, look, Mongols committed mass murder. This is why these people wrote the document. This is what they were hoping to accomplish. And then that last sentence ties it back to the argument you're trying to make in that paragraph. So this version is incomplete because it only tells me what the purpose is. This one is a little bit better because it tells me what the purpose is and why. This one is the best because you've told me this is the purpose, this is why the purpose is, and now I've tied it back to the argument I'm trying to make. So that's the kind of sourcing we are looking for in your DBQs. But notice it is still only one complex sentence, or if you broke it up, it's only 2 sentences. It doesn't have to be hugely long. It just has to be specific and accomplish the entire goal. So hopefully this demo has given you a little bit better understanding of sourcing, but I also will have a second part or a second video to show you how we apply this to the French Revolution sourcing activity you guys just did. You guys, once again, as always, thanks for watching. You're awesome.